Hey YouTubers, it's me, Lonnie Clark, Beyond Extinction Love, now that I know what the name of my channel is again. I'm going to read another chapter of Black Like Me, John Howard Griffin. We're at the bottom of page 52. We ended at the top of 53. I'm going to read the very last sentence that I read, and then we can get into it. If you remember, he's headed to Hattiesburg because that's where the grand jury, refused to look at the information on a lynching, a murder lynching. And the grand jury refused to indict the lynchers, even though the FBI chronicled all the information. So he's headed there to figure out what's going on in Mississippi for a black man. An Army officer hurried to get at the rear of the white line. I stepped back to let him get in front. He refused and went to the end of the colored portion of the line. Every Negro craned his head to look at the phenomenon. I have learned that men in uniform, particularly officers, rarely descend to show discrimination, perhaps because of the integration of our armed forces. We sweated through our clothes, and I was ready to leave and try for a later bus when they allowed us to board. Though nominally segregation is not permitted on interstate buses, no Negro would be fool enough to try to sit anywhere except at the rear on one going into Mississippi. I occupied a seat to myself not far from the back. Muffled conversation sprang up around me. Well, here we go into Mississippi, the most lied about state in the Union. That's what they claim, a man said behind me. It's the truth, too, said another. Only it's Mississippi that does all the lying. We drove through New Orleans under an overcast sky. Air conditioning in the bus cooled us comfortably. As we crossed the bridge, the water of Lake Pontchartrain reflected the sky's gray tone with white caps on its disturbed surface. The bus stopped at the outskirts of town to take on more passengers. Among them was a striking Negro, tall, slender man, elegantly dressed, the Valentino type. He wore a mustache and a neatly trimmed Van Dyke beard. He walked towards the rear, giving the whites a fawning, almost tender look. His expression twisted to a sneer when he reached the back and surveyed the Negroes. He sat sideways in an empty seat across the aisle from me and began to harangue two brothers behind him. This place stinks, damn punk niggers. Look at all of them. Bunch of dirty punks. Don't know how to dress. You don't deserve anything better. Mein Kampf. Do you speak German? No, you're ignorant. You make me sick. He proceeded to denounce his race venomously. He spoke fragments of French, Spanish, and Japanese. I averted my head to the window and watched the country fly past as we traveled through an area of sunlight. I did not want to become involved with any discussion with this strange man. He was soon in a violent argument with one of the brothers. They quarreled to the point of rage over whether Juarez was in Old Mexico or New Mexico. The elegant one shouted, "You can't lie to Christophe. Christophe's got brains. No ignorant punk like you can fool him. You've never been to Juarez." He jumped abruptly to his feet. Fearing violence, I turned toward him. He stood poised, ready to strike the other, his eyes narrowed into slits of hatred. "If you hit me, you'll just be hitting me in the wrong," the poor-dressed Negro said, looking calmly up at Christophe. His seat companion added with a generous smile, "He's my brother. I'd have to take his part." "You threatening me?" Christophe whispered. "No, now look," the brother placated. "Why don't you two just agree not to talk?" "He won't say another word to me? You promise?" Christophe said. He lowered his fist, but his face was not relaxed. "No, he won't. Will you?" The poorly dressed one shrugged his shoulders pleasantly and said, "I guess." "Don't speak! Don't speak!" Christophe shouted into his face. Okay, he said, glancing towards me as though to say, "The elegant Christophe, Must be insane. Christoph stared at him for some time before moving into the seat next to me. His presence set my nerves on edge. He was cunning and apparently vicious, and I did not know what kind of scene he might start. I stared out the window, turning so far he could only see the back of my head. He slouched far down in the seat, and his working hands wildly in the air as though he were playing a guitar. He began to sing the blues softly, mournfully, lowering his voice at the obscene words. A strange Swedish odor detached from him. I supposed it to be marijuana, but it was only a guess. I felt his elbow dig into my ribs. How you like that, Pappy? I nodded, trying to be both polite and non-committal. He had pulled his hat down over his eyes. He lighted a cigarette and let it dangle from his lips. I turned back to the window, hoping he would leave me alone. He nudged me again, and I looked around. He bent his head far back to gaze at me under his lowered hat brim. You don't dig the blues, do you, Daddy? I don't know, I said. He studied me with narrow eyes. Then, as though he had found some answer, he flashed me a magnificent smile, leaned hard against me, and whispered, I bet you dig this, Daddy. And he punched his hat back, concentrated, stiffened his hands, palms upward, and in a supplicating gesture began to softly chant, Tantum ergo sanctinium venemeru seneru, as beautiful Latin as I have ever heard. Boy, that was not beautiful Latin. Sorry, you guys, I messed that all up. I stared at him dumbfounded as he chanted the Gregorian version of this famous text. He glanced at me tenderly, his face soft as though he were on the verge of tears. That got you, didn't it, Dad? Yes, I said. He made a huge sign of the cross, lowered his head, and recited again with perfect Latin diction the Confiteor. When it was over, he remained still in profound introspection. Above the hum of the bus's wheels on the pavement, silence surrounded us. No one spoke. Doubtless those nearest us who had witnessed the strange scene were perplexed. You were an altar boy, I guess, I said. I was, he said, not raising his head. I wanted to be a priest. His mobile face revealed every emotion. His eyes darkened with regret. The man across the aisle grinned and said, Better not believe anything he tells you. Christoph's handsome face congealed instantly to hatred. I told you not to talk to me. The man's brother intervened. He just forgot. Then the poorly dressed one, Don't say anything to him. He can't stand you. I was talking to the other fellow, the one in the dark glasses, he said. Shut up, Christoph shouted. You were talking about me, and I don't even want you to do that. Just be quiet, the man's brother said. He's going to be mad at anything you say. God damn, it's a free son of a bitchin' country, the other said feebly, the smile remaining unchanged on his face. I'm not afraid of him. Well, just hush. No need in you talking to him, his brother pleaded. You keep quiet or else, Christoph said haughtily. My stomach contracted with uneasiness, certain there would be a fight. I was astonished to see Christoph cut his eyes around to me and wink, as though he secretly was amused. He glared his enemy down for some time before turning back to me. I came to sit by you because you're the only one here that looks like he's got enough sense to carry on an intelligent conversation. Thank you, I said. I'm not pure Negro, he said proudly. My mother was French and my father Indian. I see. She was Portuguese, my mother, a lovely woman, Christoph sighed. I see. The man across the aisle smiled broadly at the obvious admission of a lie from Christoph. I gave him a warning glance, and he did not challenge our friend's Portuguese, French, Indian background. Let's see, Christoph said, eyeing me speculatively. What blood have you got? Give me a minute. Christoph never makes a mistake. I can always tell what kind of blood a man's got in him. He took my face between his hands and examined me closely. I waited, certain this strange man would expose me. Finally, he nodded gravely to me and indicated he had deciphered my blood background. I have it now. His eyes glowed, and he hesitated before making his dramatic announcement to the world. I cringed, preparing explanations, and then decided I would try to stop him from exposing me. Wait, let me. Florida Navajo, he interrupted triumphantly. Your mother was part Florida Navajo, wasn't she? I felt like laughing, first with relief, and then at the thought that my Dutch-Irish mother was being anything so exotic as a Florida Navajo. At the same time, I felt vaguely disappointed to find Christoph no brighter than the rest of us. He waited for my answer. You're pretty sharp, I said. Ha! I never miss. Instantly, his expression degenerated to viciousness. I hate us, Father. I am not a father. Ah, you can't fool Christoph. I know you're a priest, even if you're dressed in civilian clothes. Look at these punks, Father. Dumb, ignorant bastards. They don't know the score. I'm getting out of this country. His anger vanished. He leaned to whisper in my ear, his voice suddenly abject. I'll tell you the truth, Father. I'm just out of the pen, 4 years. I'm on my way to see my wife. She's waiting with a new car for me in Slidell, and God, what a reunion we're going to have. His face crumpled and his head fell to his chest. Silently he wept. Don't cry, I whispered. It's all right. Don't cry. He raised his head and rolled his eyes upward in agony, his face bathed in tears, all of his arrogant defenses gone. He said, sometime, Father, when you say Mass, will you take the white host for Christoph? You're wrong to believe I'm a priest, I said, but I'll remember you the next time I go to Mass. Ah, that's the only peace, he sighed. That's the peace my soul longs for. I wish I could come back home to it, but I can't. I haven't been inside a church for 17 years. You can always go back. Nah, he snorted. I've got to go shoot up a couple of guys. My surprise must have shown. A smile of glee lighted his face. Don't worry, Daddy. I'm going to watch out. Why don't you get off with me and let's shoot up this town together? I told him I could not. The bus slowed into Slidell. Christoph got to his feet, straightened his tie, stared furiously at the man across the aisle for a moment, bowed to me, and got off. We were relieved to have him gone, though I could not help wondering what his life might be were he not torn with the frustrations of his Negro-ness. At Slidell, we changed into another Greyhound bus with a new driver, a middle-aged man, large belly with a heavy jowled face, filigreed with tiny red blood vessels near the surface of his cheeks. A stockily built young Negro, who introduced himself as Bill Williams, asked if I minded having him sit beside me. Now that Christoph was gone, the tensions disappeared in our Negro section. Everyone knew, from having heard our conversation, that I was a stranger in the area. Talk flowed easily, and they surrounded me with warmth. People come down here and say Mississippi is the worst place in the world, Bill said. But we can't all live in the North. Of course not. And it looks like a beautiful country, I said, glancing out at the giant pine trees. Seeing that I was friendly, he offered advice. If you're not used to things in Mississippi, You'll have to watch yourself pretty closely till you catch on, he said. The others, hearing, nodded in agreement. I told him I did not know what to watch out for. Well, you know you don't want to even look at a white woman. In fact, you look down at the ground or the other way. A large, pleasant Negro woman smiled at me across the aisle. They're awful touchy on that here. You may not even know you're looking in a white woman's direction, but they'll try to make something out of it, she said. If you pass by a picture show and they've got women on the posters outside, don't look at them either. Is it that bad? He assured me it was. Another man said, somebody's sure to say, hey boy, what are you looking at that white gal like that for? I remember the woman on the bus in New Orleans using almost that same expression. And you dress pretty well, Bill continued, his heavy black face frowning in concentration. If you walk past an alley, walk out in the middle of the street, plenty of people here, white and colored, would knock you in the head if they thought you had money on you. If white boys holler at you, just keep walking. Don't let them stop you and start asking you questions. I told him I appreciated the warning. Can you all think of anything else? He asked the others. That covers it, one of them said. I thank them for telling me these things. Well, if I was to come to your part of the country, I'd want somebody to tell me, Bill said. He told me he was a truck driver working out of Hattiesburg. He had taken a load to New Orleans, where he had left his truck for repairs, and caught the bus back to Hattiesburg. He asked if I had made arrangements for a place to stay. I told him no. He said the best thing would be for me to contact a certain important person who would put me in touch with someone reliable who would find me a decent and safe place. Wow. It was late dusk when the bus pulled into some little town for a stop. We get about 10 minutes here, Bill said. Let's get off and stretch our legs. We've got a men's room here if you need to go. The driver stood up and faced the passengers. 10-minute rest stop, he announced. The whites rose and ambled off. Bill and I led the Negroes towards the door. As soon as he saw us, the driver blocked our way. Bill slipped his arm under and walked towards the dim-lit building shed. Hey, boy, where are you going? The driver shouted to Bill while he stretched his arms across the opening to prevent him from stepping down. Hey, you boy, I'm talking to you. Bill's footsteps crunched hurriedly across the gravel. I stood at the bottom step waiting. The driver turned back to me. Where do you think you're going? He asked, his heavy cheeks quivering with each word. I'd like to go to the restroom, I smiled and moved a step down. He tightened his grip on the door facings and shouldered in close to block me. Does your ticket say for you to get off here? He asked. No, sir, but the others. Then you get your ass back in that seat and don't you move till you get to Hattiesburg, he commanded. You mean I can't go to the... you get your ass back like I told you, he said, his voice rising. I can't be bothered rounding up all you people when we're ready to go. You announced a rest stop. The whites got off, I said, unable to believe he really meant to deprive us of restroom privileges. He stood on his toes and put his face close to mine. His nose flared. Footlights caught silver glints in the hair that curled out of his nostrils. He spoke slowly, threateningly. Are you arguing with me? No, sir, I sighed. Then you do as I say. We turned like a small herd of cattle and drifted back to our seats. The others grumbled about how unfair it was. The large woman was apologetic, as though it embarrassed her for a stranger to see Mississippi's dirty linen. There's no call for him to act like that, she said. They usually let us off. I sat in the monochrome gloom of dusk, scarcely believing that in the year of freedom, any man could deprive another of anything so basic as the need to quench thirst or use the restroom. There was nothing of the feel of America here. It was rather some strange country suspended in ugliness. Tension hung in the air, a continual threat, even though you could not put your finger on it. Boy, doesn't that sound like today. Well, I heard a man behind me say softly but firmly, "If I can't go in there, then I'm going in here. If I'm not going to sit here and bust." I glanced back and saw that it was the same poorly dressed man who had so outraged Christoph. He walked in a half crouch to the place behind the last seat, where he urinated loudly on the floor. Indistinguishable sounds of approval rose from those around me. Quiet laughter, clearing throats, and whispers. "Let's all do it," a man said. "Yeah, flood this bus and end this damn foolishness." Bitterness dissolved our delight to give the bus driver and the bus as good as they deserved. The move was on, but it was quelled by another voice. "No, let's don't. It'll just give them something else to hold against us," the older man said. A woman agreed. All of us could see the picture. The whites would start claiming that we were unfit, that Negroes did not even know enough to go to the restroom. They just did it in the back of the bus, never mentioning, of course, that the driver would not let us off. The driver's bullish voice attracted our attention. I'm going to end there. It's on page 62. We're at 21 minutes. I'll be back tomorrow. And please do join me. Please put in a heart or anything on a comment. Make any kind of a comment, or even just a little heart or an American flag or a fist, a black fist would be good. Anything like that. It helps boost the algorithms. And please subscribe to my channel, Beyond Extinction Love, and we will see you tomorrow. Ciao.